What is up, everyone? Matt Parrino here with Ryan Talbot coming to you on the final day of the NFL regular season. And the Buffalo Bills finished things out in, I'm going to say, shocking fashion, Ryan. I mean, it didn't matter what they were doing in this game today. Everything went right offensively, defensively, special teams. We're going to get into all of that. The Bills take out the Dolphins 56-26. The first time ever that a Bills offense has gone over 500 yards in a season. I think the closest was in 460 range. I had it up earlier today. Just an absolute, let's call it what it is, a butt whooping in Bills Stadium to close out this season. And we're the Shout Football Podcast. If you're joining us right now, I just drove home from the stadium. It was a crazy and chaotic finish to the. Not to the game, but with everything going on in the 4:00 hour on through the afternoon games with the Bills playoff seeding. We're gonna get into that as well. Trying to get out a bunch of stories. It's been crazy. We're brought to you by Tops Friendly Markets, your neighborhood store with more. We're going to talk about all things Bills today and into the playoffs. He's Ryan Talbot. Whew! What'd you think about that game?
You're right. That game was wild, and here's why it's wild. The Bills decide to rest Trey White, Jerry Hughes, Mario Addison. They're without Cole Beasley. And let's be honest, Buffalo's first 3-4 series, they looked like they were playing in mud. They weren't moving the ball well. They were pretty ineffective. And it kind of just like, okay, this is just like the offense coming out for a few series. And then something just clicked. And once it clicked, they were off and running, and they never looked back. And not trying to kick the Dolphins while they're down, but what an embarrassing performance where you can clinch a playoff berth with a win, knowing that the Bills are going to probably be resting their starters for half the game. And this is the type of performance that you roll out. And now they're done. Their season is officially over after all the other games played out. It was a wild game. We saw outstanding performances from Isaiah McKenzie, Antonio Williams, and a few others, which we'll get into. And now, Matt, most of all, we know who the Bills are playing on Wild Card Weekend.
What a devastating offense this has to be to prepare for and play against, because it doesn't matter where you look on the depth chart at wide receiver. It is a player that can have a game-changing impact every time Josh Allen goes back to pass. And I want to start with, well, first of all, let's get it out of the way. 7 catches, 64 yards. Stephon Diggs goes over 1,500 yards on the season. He's going to end up leading the NFL in receptions and receiving yards in his first year in Buffalo, a team with Josh Allen. What a season that he's had. We'll talk about him, obviously. But Isaiah McKenzie, and this is something we talked about on the podcast last week, with Cole Beasley going out, who steps into that role? And I think that over the course of this season, because, fans have gotten so used to Isaiah McKenzie in that gadget role, that, jet sweeps and trick plays and all this kind of stuff. They forget the skill set that this guy has as a playmaker. And, I asked him today in the postgame press conference, and I'm going to write about it this week, maybe tomorrow, for Syracuse.com in New York Upstate, about what he's been doing while he's been waiting for this chance that he got today. And six catches, 65 yards, 2 receiving touchdowns. First of all, the second receiving touchdown was an absolute dime by Josh Allen, who patiently waited. And he did. It was a free play, so he wasn't worried about getting sacked or throwing an interception, but basically leaned back, not back across his body, but he wanted to go left, and he kind of saw McKenzie kind of come breaking open and kind of just like floated it. It was just unbelievable pass. Like I sat there and watched as he threw that ball, and I was like, the confidence that you have to make that catch. But I want to talk specifically about McKenzie, because he is such a vital part of what makes this offense so special, because they have guys that they can plug in and play right away. It's almost like they don't skip a beat. John Brown misses 5 games, and they figure out a way to still be dangerous. And today was just unbelievable. I thought that going into this game, Miami had the number 1 ranked scoring defense in the NFL, allowing 19 points a game, 18.8. The Bills put up 28 in the first half. 26%. Ben Albright covers the Broncos out in Denver, NFL Insider. He tweeted out an unbelievable eye-popping stat. The 26% of the Dolphins surrendered points in 2020 have come at the hands of Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. This is a offense that has to scare every defense in these playoffs, AFC and NFC included.
Yeah, you just have to hope that the Bills carry this momentum into the playoffs. We've seen this sometimes. We saw it with Baltimore last year, for instance, a team that was firing all cylinders, and when it came to playoff time, they delivered a dud. Now, I'm not expecting that, but the way that they're playing right now is scary for any team that they're facing along the way. And obviously, we have the Indianapolis Colts to talk about here in a few minutes. But Isaiah McKenzie steps in with Cole Beasley out of the way with a knee injury. And you're right, he has the game of his career. 2 touchdowns receiving, a punt return. He's getting open. He talked about the receivers in that room giving him confidence and talking about how good of a player he is. And he looked the part on Sunday. The Dolphins had no answers for him. He had quite a bit of separation, especially on that second touchdown that he scored along the way. John Brown comes in, doesn't miss a beat. You can see that Allen and Brown are on the same page, and they kind of finish it off with a nice long touchdown pass right before halftime. Buffalo is going to be scary, and here's the scariest part. They're only going to get better. There is a chance Cole Beasley is back in time for Wild Card Weekend, and Kenny Stills will, reportedly be signing here, most likely, I would assume, tomorrow, so he can start practicing with the team immediately. So now you're taking this loaded wide receiver room, this unit that Gabriel Davis, long bomb from Matt Barkley in the game too, and a great game. You're taking this wide receiver room that's playing at a high level, and you're just adding more weapons come Wild Card Weekend, possibly.
One thing I'll say though that's different, and you probably agree with this, for this offense and what was going on with the Baltimore Ravens last year, is the Baltimore Ravens really were the success of their offense was predicated on Lamar Jackson's ability to run the ball. And I think that what the Bills have going for them is that they can beat you when Josh is running or Josh is throwing. I mean, he really hasn't even had to run this year. And I think obviously there's some concern about the lack of a run game. They haven't really had to use it. Deion Dawkins, I think, said it best today, is we play to kill, is what he said. I mean, I'm paraphrasing there. I think that was close to the quote. They know who they are. They come out and they pass the ball, and there's so many different ways where, Josh Allen can feed Stephon Diggs, and that can open things up for a Gabriel Davis or an Isaiah McKenzie or Cole Beasley, or now John Brown, who connects in the 32-yard touchdown pass today. Something interesting that stuck out to me from postgame with Josh Allen. He was talking about the fact that the Bills on offense really understand who they are as an offense. They know what their identity is. And part of that identity is a confidence that when they get into a rut, when they have a slow start out of the gates, and we saw that today, those first 2 series, they look lethargic, I wrote. I thought that it was a combination of, obviously going up against a good defense of the Miami Dolphins, but also a situation where you probably don't want to put too much on tape if you're Brian Daboll, especially given the fact that there was a scenario that could have played out where the Dolphins could have lost or won, and the Bills would have played them again next week in the wild card round. So I think you want to be a little bit judicious. And then Josh Allen kind of revealed that, those first 2 series weren't going well, and Brian Daboll went back to and gave Josh Allen the plays that he likes. And he started spreading the ball around, and they were moving the ball down the field, started feeding Stephon Diggs a little bit more. And so I think from that perspective, this is such a difficult team offense to handle, because even when you're having success, they're one play, one piece of success away from getting it going. And they've gotten it going in different times in different games all season long.
Yeah, this is like going against the Kansas City Chiefs for opposing teams. You can get out to a slow start, and all of a sudden it just takes one series for them to really get things going. And that's what you saw today. You saw Stephon Diggs get involved, John Brown, Isaiah McKenzie, Gabriel Davis. You saw players that you weren't even probably on your radar in the second half, like in Antonio Williams. This team has playmakers. This team has an offensive line that is blocking extremely well, especially obviously with that starting unit in terms of pass protection. So this is just one of those matchup nightmares for any team that comes in along the way. And, the Colts have a very talented defense. We'll talk more about that during the week, obviously during our preview show and on our Wednesday show as well. But they're going to have trouble matching up with all of Buffalo's weapons with their secondary. It's going to be a really interesting battle. But I just think that Buffalo, coming in, that they're on a roll and they're going to be really tough to slow down in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm. I think the key to giving the Bills trouble is getting your running game going and then having the ability to, have playmakers that can make plays down the field. I mean, you saw earlier this season, I mean, the blueprint was kind of written by the Kansas City Chiefs, the way they ran it. Travis Kelce had himself a game. I think it was 2 touchdowns in that game. But the problem for even the Chiefs now is that the Bills are healthy on defense. And you saw it today. You saw even with Tre'Davious White out of the lineup, and it was Tua. And listen, we've both talked about the limitations of Tua Tagovailoa in this offense. And maybe even, we could talk about this in a little while, some concern if you're the Miami Dolphins about trusting Tua with your long-term, future of your franchise. I mean, the Dolphins have the number 3 overall pick. They're going to have a real decision on their hands this offseason with a lot of different options at their disposal. Maybe trading up, maybe taking one of the 3 quarterbacks. We'll see. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But I just think that this was a game where this defense just inflicted their will on a young quarterback and an offense that just doesn't really scare anybody. They turn the ball over, and that's what this Bills defense wants to be: attack oriented, take the ball away. You're getting some comments on the "See in Buffalo, it's going to be chilly" shirt. Shout out to Steve Tasker. That was a legendary video. So I feel like you had to grab the Steve Tasker shirt and wrap it on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a legend guy. He takes the time to talk to us a little bit too. So great video. Want to kind of represent him here and give him a little bit of a shout out. But yeah, like you were saying, you saw Buffalo's blueprint today. Score a bunch of points, make teams one-dimensional, make them have to throw against you, and then you benefit from the turnovers. You're going to see that same game plan against the Colts. You're going to see Josh Allen slinging the ball over the field, and Buffalo's hoping they can get out and build a little bit of a lead, because the one thing that the Colts do extremely well is run the ball. If you can make them more one-dimensional, make it so you can't be giving Jonathan Taylor 30 carries, so you can't get Nyheim Hines involved, although he's more of the pass-catching option, so he could be in that scenario. That will play to your strengths. Phillip Rivers, at this point in his career, is not a guy that, you would think could single-handedly win you a game. And if it becomes a shootout between Josh Allen and Phillip Rivers, I think people are going to take Josh Allen every single day of the week. So Buffalo's going to have to come out, play fast, and they're going to have to stop the run early, or at least limit the run early, because if Jonathan Taylor gets going and they keep up with the Bills in that regard, holding the ball, limiting Buffalo's offensive possessions, we could be in for a ball game this weekend.
Let's talk a little bit about Tua here, because I see a comment like there's no need to move on. Listen, Tua at this stage right now, there's potential for growth, no doubt about it. Getting thrown into your rookie season with no preseason, off-season work in the spring, training, a real training camp. There was always going to be limitations for a lot of these rookies. But you look around the league and the success that Joe Burrow had and the success that Justin Herbert has, sometimes there's a little bit of, an it factor. And I go back to Josh Allen's rookie season. Like, look at some of the plays that he made. I mean, you obviously bring up what was it in the Minnesota game where the hurdle over Anthony Barr, the touchdown pass to Robert Foster in the Jacksonville game. There were moments that you take from that game where from his rookie season where you're saying, there's potential there. If the good plays can kind of be somehow expanded upon. I've watched a lot of Tua this season, and I had concerns about his mechanics and the lack of quickness in his mechanics at this level, because it's such a quick game, and the speed of the game, I think, is something that's overwhelming to young players. And I don't see it with Tua. I'm not going to sit here and say, covering a team that has Josh Allen, who has developed into the quarterback that he has, that it's impossible, or that Tua can't become a good quarterback in this league. But I think it's going to be a long road. And if you think that there's a guy that you can get in this draft that is a home run, can't miss player, you might have to consider it if you're the Miami Dolphins. That's all I'm saying. You might have to make a hard decision, a la maybe an Arizona Cardinals. That's a different situation. They took Josh Rosen at 12, 10, 12, somewhere in that range. He was the fourth quarterback taken in that draft. So it's a completely different situation. But this is a quarterback-driven league, and if you don't believe in Tua after now a pretty decent sample size in year one, the Miami Dolphins have a decision to make this offseason.
Yeah, and like you said, they have a top 3 pick thanks to the Houston Texans here. And, there's Justin Fields, there's Zach Wilson. There's some quarterbacks that are appealing options at minimum. And, like you said, Brian Flores has seen a large sample size. So he might say, okay, I have my reservations about this guy. I've benched him twice in season. I benched him in the Broncos game. I benched him in the Raiders game. I didn't have that faith in him to deliver because of the way he played. Now, he had a great game against the Chiefs. He had a few other good games mixed in there, and he is a rookie. So the people in the comments saying, oh, come on, they're not going to give up on this guy yet. Very good chance that they don't. But if there's someone that establishes themselves behind Trevor Lawrence, obviously, as a prospect that looks like a can't-miss guy, or he has all the intangibles that you're looking for, why wouldn't you at least consider it? It's something that has to be in play. Yeah, you can go out and get him a top-tier wide receiver. You could get him more protection on the line. You could go defense. But at the end of the day, they already have some weapons there in Devontae Parker and Mike Gesicki. And I'm not saying that's enough to be a Super Bowl contender by any means, but it wasn't until late in the game that he was finally throwing downfield to Parker and connecting with him a few times. Some really nice balls along the sidelines at times there. He's tentative. He's throwing it short, or maybe that's the game plan, but so many throws today were just drop-offs, little things, dinking and dunking, and sometimes they moved down the field with some success. But as the Bills kept building up their lead, you couldn't stay in the game with those types of drives because it takes a lot of time off the clock, and you need that quarterback that can hit the big play. Right before halftime, Buffalo calls a timeout, gets the ball back, and you see Josh Allen, 2 long passes to get him down to about the 30-yard line right away. And sure enough, they connect it shortly thereafter with another touchdown. You need a player like that in today's NFL, someone that you can have a minute and a half on the clock and say, or even a minute on the clock before halftime and say, we're going to go for a touchdown here. Not just a field goal. We're going for a touchdown because we have that much faith in this guy. So is that I don't know. Like you said, there's enough sample size out there to say maybe he's not that guy. Maybe he doesn't have the NFL arm. But that's not a decision that's up to us. Luckily, it's up to Brian Flores, and he has to decide whether or not Tua can hang with the Josh Allens of the world for the next decade plus in the AFC East.
Well, who the Bills are going to have to hang with is going to be the Indianapolis Colts in the opening round of the playoffs. And we watched a absolutely crazy game in Tennessee that ended up deciding it. Had Tennessee lost that game to the Houston Texans that went down to the wire, it would have been Tennessee coming to Buffalo, losing the division, and obviously a host of different matchups. But as it stands right now, the Ravens will play the Titans at the Titans. The Browns will play at the Steelers, and the Colts will play at the Bills. Let's start with our first impression. We're not getting too deep into this game, but I do, this is something that we've been talking about. We talked about the Browns a bit. We talked about the Miami Dolphins as a potential playoff opponent. Phillip Rivers and this Indianapolis Colts team is going to come in here, 11-win football team with some intriguing matchups. I think that their defense is probably better than their offense, but since T.Y. Hilton's come back, it seems like they have a more weapons to beat you. Jonathan Taylor coming on, obviously, in the second half of the season. What are your impressions of this match? Your first impressions?
First impressions, it's going to be another chess match between Josh Allen and a top-tier defense. Now, we've seen Allen pick apart the Dolphins twice now, the 49ers, the Patriots, the Broncos, the Rams, you name it. He's had his way with a lot of these top defenses, but he hasn't gone against the Colts yet. So the Colts could come out with a really good game plan. Maybe they're the team that has a game plan that truly slows him down a little bit, but it's yet to be seen. On the other side of the ball, it's all about making the Colts have to pass the ball. Now, like you said, they have weapons. They have T.Y. Hilton. They have a talented young wide receiver in Michael Pittman Jr. And obviously they have a fantastic running back in Jonathan Taylor and a pass-catching option in Nyheim Hines. This is not a team that I think fans are going to expect the Bills to come in here and blow out necessarily. And they shouldn't. Playoffs any given Saturday or Sunday. These teams can show up. But I just like the overall matchup in terms of who they could have played when it got down to the wire between the Colts and the Titans. I kind of sat there and I said, okay, which quarterback would I not want to see if I were the Bills next weekend? And at the end of the day, Tannehill is playing head and shoulders. I mean, significant level better than Phillip Rivers. So you want that team where if you can get a lead, you can build a lead, and you can make Rivers have to throw the ball a lot. I think the Bills can create some turnovers in that matchup.
I'm looking at, the one real passing team that the Colts have played this season, and it was a game against the Green Bay Packers where it was Rivers versus Aaron Rodgers, and it was a bit of a shootout. The Colts ended up winning 34-31 in overtime. Really good game, but looking at Aaron Rodgers' stats, 27-38, 311 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a pick. This defense is good, but they do have a little bit of bend but don't break, if you will. Now, I'm looking through their defense because I know that DeForest Buckner missed a few games. He did play in this one. That's, to me, the matchup, and I'm really excited to get a lot of their games on this week, starting tomorrow, and really kind of dive into their season and look at, how they've had the success that they have. They're 11-win football team. They're much improved. I think Frank Reich has done a really good job. They brought in Phillip Rivers, and there was a little bit of a slow start there for the Indianapolis Colts, which with Rivers kind of turned it on as halfway through the season hit. But DeForest Buckner is a chaos creating interior defensive lineman, that 3-tech role that can kind of rush the passer, stop the run. We saw the impact that Chris Jones had last year. We saw the impact that Buckner had last year in the Super Bowl for the 49ers against Patrick Mahomes and that Kansas City offense. He's a guy that really pops to me that they're going to have to really do their due diligence on this week. And the preparation has to be strong. That means that Josh Allen's going to have to get the ball out of his hands very quickly. But I go back to the weapons they have. They have the weapons to beat almost any type of defensive scheme or amount of playmakers on defense because of not only the playmakers that they have, but the protection that Josh Allen is getting. The biggest key to, I think, the sustained success, no matter who's in and out of the lineup at receiver, has been the continuity built over the course of the last month and a half since John Feliciano returned, got Mitch Morse healthy, and figured out that Ike Butker was an upgrade over Brian Winters. You've landed on a 5 that I think, at least in pass protection, has really asserted itself as, a top tier pass protecting offensive line in the NFL. Yeah.
Miami had some success early today. Van Ginkel got in on a blitz. They sent some heat early.
Van Ginkel. Love that name.
Had a good game for them. One of the highlights for the Dolphins in that matchup. And Allen took a sack. He took a few hits. But then that unit, they kind of got together. They figured things out. And then Allen, like you said, had a lot of time to throw. He was patient with it. There were a few times where he held it, long, and at the last possible second with pressure bearing down, he got rid of it. So that would be more on him holding the ball for an extended period of time. This offensive line has fared very well in pass protection. They're going to have to be at their best, obviously, on Saturday or Sunday against the Colts. But if they can hold up in pass protection, there's no reason that Josh Allen won't have success throwing the ball over the field, putting up points for this team, and at worst, getting themselves into a shootout of sorts. And again, if you're in a shootout, I'm taking Josh Allen over most quarterbacks in this league at this point in time.
Yeah, I think the Bills will have some success as good as an offensive line, especially interior that the Colts have, getting pressure on him, coming up with a way to get make him really uncomfortable in the pocket that could lead to some turnovers. But we're not going to get too far into the weeds on that game. We got a whole week to break that down. We were going to talk more. We're going to be with you for a while. We're probably not going to make it till the announcement of the time and day. So if you're looking for that, that usually comes out around halftime of the Sunday Night Football game. Definitely keep it locked on at Syracuse.com. We'll have that then. But we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. We'll talk more Bills.
Ready for football? Tops is with ready-to-serve fan favorites everyone will cheer for. Delicious family or party packs like pizza, sliders, fried chicken, barbecue, or beef on weck. Starting at only $4 per serving. Perfect for game day and any day. Only at Tops.
All right, so let's get into the secondary a little bit because we saw something interesting today. Tre'Davious White was obviously held out of the game. Jerry Hughes, Mario Addison basically given the day off, rest up for the playoffs, which meant Levi Wallace and Josh Norman started the game. And as the game progressed, it was kind of like a rotation. They brought in Dane Jackson, kind of worked him into a rotation with the three of them, and they kind of took turns in different series. And my big takeaway from the three of them, first of all, Josh Norman with a pick six. I mean, this guy, I will give him credit. When he came to Buffalo, and he signed with Buffalo and had his first press conference a few months later, one of the things he said is he brings a turnover mentality with him. And if you take his sample size of snaps, and it's not very big, I think I don't even know if he's had a start. I'll have to look that up. He came in for Levi Wallace, and I think he did end up starting the next week and got hurt. He got that big fumble in the fumble recovery or forced fumble in the Raiders game. And then today, a pick six on Tua Tagovailoa. It was a bad throw, and it looked like the receiver tripped, but he made the play and ran it back for a touchdown. And that's big. If you can get Josh Norman playing confident football at this time of year, that's huge. But the big thing here is, Ryan, Dane Jackson. Every time this guy steps on the football field and is given an opportunity this season, I think it's 3 games now, he's making plays.
Yeah. First with Josh Norman, he also started in that Tennessee game because Trey White was injured in that. But today, even on the passes where Devontae Parker hauled in balls, Josh Norman was right there. He had some tight coverage, and he almost had a second turnover on downs. I thought that was a really ticky-tack pass interference penalty that kept the Dolphins in that game a little bit early. Obviously came back, though, with the pick six shortly thereafter, like you said. So he's playing pretty good football entering the playoffs. We haven't had to say Levi Wallace's name in a while. And when you don't say a cornerback's name, that's usually a good thing. But, yeah, Dane Jackson breaking up passes, getting his hands in there, making multiple plays, every single opportunity that he gets. Now, here's the nice thing about the playoffs. If the Bills want to elevate Dane Jackson for every playoff game, they can do it, and they don't have to worry about the waiver process and possibly losing him to another team. That's some rule that they're enforcing here in the playoffs. So if they do want to get him back out there and add some extra depth to that back end and say, just in case something happens with one of our cornerbacks, it's a foolproof plan at this point. The guy's played well in all of his opportunities, so I wouldn't be surprised if he is someone that is elevated next week on Wild Card Weekend.
Yeah, it's a great story, and I think one of the coolest things, if you're a Bills fan, on Dane Jackson, I know there's a big there's a Dane Jackson hive out there that are just clamoring. I got one gentleman who I'm very appreciative of his engagement, and he always he DMs me during the games usually with thoughts and ideas and different things like that. And he wants Dane Jackson playing over Josh Norman, Levi Wallace, and I understand that. But what I think is cool if you're a Bills fan is you might have CB2 of the future on your roster right now. And you look at that draft next year and where the Bills are going to be drafting and kind of what they want to do. Maybe you can be a little bit mobile and go after a game-changing pass rusher, or maybe if you're not able to re-sign Matt Milano, and I know that's a scary thought for some Bills fans that really want that deal to get done, you can maybe find his replacement early in the draft, first or second round. And I think there's a lot of options. And I think one of the things that you do know is your front office, led by Brandon Beane, which is going to look probably a lot different come draft time. because of all of the potential hires outside of the organization, they've proven to be able to recognize talent, find talent, draft them, and develop them. And that's huge. And Dane Jackson in this season, a 7th round draft pick, to be able to play at the level that he's played in the 3 opportunities he's been given, that's a slam dunk, huge find, huge get. And they still have depth everywhere you look. I mean, Cam Lewis is a guy we don't even talk about anymore, but when he was given an opportunity, he played pretty well too.
Yeah, the Bills have depth at cornerback. They suddenly have maybe a third running back option in Antonio Williams next year.
Get after it, Ryan. That's your guy.
I know. I hyped him up today in our little Zoom session with some Bills fans. You have an option there. You know, this team has done a really good job of finding talent. Look at day 3 of this draft. You have Gabriel Davis. You have Tyler Bass. You have Dane Jackson, and then undrafted free agents. You had Reggie Gilliam. You add an Antonio Williams. They're hitting not only late in the draft, but shortly thereafter. And then there's some unknowns. Who knows what Isaiah Hodgins brings to the wide receiver room next year? Who knows if Jake Fromm can take on a number 2 quarterback job, down the road here after we saw Matt Bitcoin Barkley throwing some bombs today. But they're drafting well, not just early on in these drafts, but they're hitting picks late. And that is the sign of a great regime. That's a sign of a team that can contend for a long period of time.
Indeed. I'm just taking it through the comments here. If you have anything you'd like us to hit on, please drop it right in the comment section. We will answer questions, talk about anything that you guys would like to talk about. I mean, are you surprised at all, Ryan? We sat in the press box today, and that's one of the cool thing about the home games. We haven't been traveling this season. The hope is that we will, in the case of a road playoff game and potentially Super Bowl. I don't even think that's a jinx type of thing anymore. I mean, you do these power rankings every week. We talked about this again on the Zoom chat this morning. The Bills are pretty much, I think, considered in the same tier with the Chiefs now. It's not a Chiefs and everybody else. I think it's the Chiefs and the Bills and everybody else. And some people are even kind of pushing the Bills past the Chiefs a little bit.
Yeah, they were number 1 on Pro Football Talk's power rankings last week. They were in the top 3 or 4 in just about every single power rankings. It's pretty much Chiefs and Bills. Then you have the Packers and the Saints as your top 4. And looking at those NFC teams, Aaron Rodgers can take over any game, any point in time. But I would think that the Bills and the Chiefs match up pretty well with both of those NFC teams. We saw how well the Bills fared this year against the NFC West, and we've seen them show up against a lot of these top defenses and top teams in the league all season. So the Bills do belong in that conversation with the Chiefs as one of the upper echelon or the top teams in this league based on how they've played, especially down the stretch.
Yeah, I saw a comment in here that according to ESPN stats and info, I believe, the Bills hanging 50 on the Dolphins is the first time in NFL history a number 1 ranked scoring defense has allowed 50 or more points in a game. So, I mean, that's just it. And listen, the Bills put up 28 in the first half and went on to continue the barrage with, Antonio Williams, who I think really stepped up. They brought in Brian Winters. They brought in Ryan Bates, who went to left tackle. So you take out John Feliciano and Deion Dawkins, and you expect there to be a drop-off. And I thought line play was pretty consistent. And I think line play is even more important for a guy like Matt Barkley, who doesn't have the mobility of a Josh Allen and who, could be a sitting duck back there at times. He was able to make some throws. He made some big plays. Gabriel Davis is quietly put together just an absolutely outstanding rookie season. 4th round draft pick, 7 touchdowns, second on the team behind Stephon Diggs, who went into the first position with those 3 touchdown catches against the Patriots. But this is crazy. And, John Brown adds a completely new dynamic. And the big thing takeaway from me today on him, he looked healthy. He looked like he was running well. He was cutting well. That we haven't seen since September. Yeah.
Before he went on the IR, he was almost a decoy out there on the field. He was running short routes. He wasn't stretching the field, which is, some of the things that he does extremely well. It was just, little outs and cuts and short gains. you saw it today. He went down the field and he went right by the Dolphins defender. He was cutting well. He was moving well on the field. So that stint on the IR, and then obviously it was extended a little bit when he was added onto the reserve COVID list last week as a close contact. That time off obviously did him well for those lower body injuries that he was playing with throughout a lot of this season. And if you have him at 100%, you have Stephon Diggs. We talked about this earlier in the show. If you have all these weapons, and then you add a Kenny Stills and possibly Cole Beasley to the gang again here come playoff time, I don't know how opposing teams and defenses can stop them consistently.
Mm-hmm. What do you think is the ideal path to the Super Bowl for the Bills? Like, do you think that if you're ranking teams, like, okay, I don't want to see this team this is the team I'd most like to play. Where are you landing on that? Are the Chiefs still that number one team that you think is the toughest challenge? Or do you see a team like a Baltimore or a Tennessee or whoever as maybe somebody that, could give the Bills a hard time?
I still have the Chiefs as that first team that would give them the most problems, just because Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes, and he can pull a big play out of nowhere. They have a good running game with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. The defense has improved from last season's Super Bowl team. So they're definitely the scariest. But if you look at how things play out, let's just say Pittsburgh can beat the Browns next weekend. Definitely a possibility. You could get the Colts, and if you can defeat the Colts, then you would get the Steelers, because they would be the 3 seed, and obviously the lowest seed would be going on to play against the Chiefs in the second round. And then all of a sudden you could be setting yourself up for that matchup with the Chiefs. So there's a path for the Bills to get there. Now, obviously they have to take care of their own business. I've said it a few times already in this podcast, any given Saturday or Sunday, the Colts aren't just going to come in here and lay down and let the Bills steamroll over them. They're trying to win a Super Bowl trophy as well. So it's not going to be easy, but there's a path for Buffalo. And in terms of those other teams you mentioned, Baltimore and Tennessee are both playing at a high level right now, especially Baltimore winning their last 5 games, looking more like the team that we saw last season. So I don't want to say it's almost unfortunate that one of those teams is going to get knocked out next week, but one of those teams, Buffalo or Kansas City, is not going to have to worry about, because they are going head to head. So that, of those AFC games, that might be the premier matchup, a rematch from last year where the Titans pulled off maybe what was considered a shocking upset at that point. Same thing this year. One of those teams are going home with both teams, having pretty potent offenses. So the Buffalo's path is pretty solid, I guess I would say, heading into next weekend, as long as they can get by this opening weekend matchup with the Colts.
It's funny, like, I like Pittsburgh against Cleveland next week. I think that they can win that game at home. I think Ben Roethlisberger basically getting 2 weeks to prepare, watching them up close from the sidelines, almost like a week of scouting he got to do this week, not playing. Although Mason Rudolph 300-yard game today might give them a better chance with the way that Ben's been playing at points this year. Just kidding. But here's the thing. I think if you're a Bills fan, you like the fact the Ravens and the Titans are going to beat up on each other in wild card round. I do think that there's some challenges to playing the Colts. I think that, you look at, if you could find a weakness for the Bills, it at times has been their run defense this year. Now, they pose a real threat with their interior. I mean, Quentin Nelson is an absolute mauler, and I know they lost Anthony Costanzo, but they're still going to be able to run the ball effectively, which then puts the pressure on the Bills to score points. The quicker and more you score points on a team like the Colts, the bigger of a bind that you put them in, because they can't rely on that running game. Like 250 yards on the ground for Taylor today, that is great. Like, great story for the rookie. I don't see that happen. I mean, that happened against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I don't think they're going to be able to do that necessarily against this Bills defense that is going to go into next week very, very healthy at all 3 levels. And I think they tackle better. They're tackling better in the secondary, which I think that when you're running back, a good running back like Jonathan Taylor gets past that first level, you need to make sure that you're tackling. I think that's one of the areas that they've maybe improved the most on collectively as a defense, is getting to the ball carrier and tackling. There's not nearly as many missed tackles as there were back when they played the Chiefs and Clyde Edwards-Helaire had that big game. day.
Yeah. When the Bills had those back-to-back losses against the Titans and the Chiefs, tackling was one of the big issues in those losses. They couldn't stop Derrick Henry. They couldn't stop Clyde Edwards-Helaire. The tackling's improved. And like you said, Jonathan Taylor, great performance today. Outstanding running back. A guy that should have been on every team's radar this year in terms of teams looking for a running back. He was the premier guy in this year's draft class. He's looking like it. But even looking at his performance today, it wasn't until he had a late, I think it was like a 47-yard touchdown to really seal the game. Mm-hmm. That was still a one-possession game up until that point. Late in the fourth quarter, against the team that's going to be drafting Trevor Lawrence, with the first overall pick in the 2021 draft. So if Jacksonville with Mike Glennon can hang with the Colts, I think that's a good sign for Buffalo. Now, again, Buffalo is going to have to come in and show that they can keep playing at this level come playoff time. They got out to a 16-0 lead last year, and then things fell apart on them. Put the foot on the gas pedal, get those points early, force the Colts to have to throw more, and then, see what can happen in terms of creating those turnovers. But right now, Buffalo is just on a roll. You look at these last three games, especially 56 points today against the Dolphins. They blow out the Patriots the week before. They blow out the Broncos the week before that. They are scoring at a high level right now, and you'd like to think that that's going to continue here next weekend.
A lot of comments here on Kenny Stills, and you posted a story on him. He was very excited about what he saw out of this Bills offense today. I think his one tweet was sheesh. And rightfully so, because, the kind of production that they had, even when Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs and John Brown left the game, was really impressive. I guess let's get into what we think in terms of how this offense can look and what kind of role Kenny Stills can play. I think that he's a playmaker, and I think he offers you some depth. I think it's going to take some time, first and foremost. If you're thinking that Kenny Stills is going to walk in the door, even a veteran like himself, 8-ish, 9-ish seasons in the NFL here. He's played for the Saints, the Dolphins, and the Texans. If you think he's going to walk in here, get 3 practices this week, get up to speed on the playbook, and be a big-time contributor in the wildcard game, I just don't see that necessarily. I think he is more, not only do they want to get him in the building, get a look at him now, he might be a more affordable option than maybe some other players next year. I believe Isaiah McKenzie is a free agent next year, isn't he?
I believe it was just a 1-year minimum deal that he signed this offseason after the draft.
I think he's made himself some money. I think he might have priced himself out of Buffalo with just what he's done so far this season. I don't want to, bum anybody out by any stretch of the imagination, but a game like this today against a defense the caliber of the Miami Dolphins, who were playing for the playoff, for him to go out there, score 3 touchdowns, show his versatility with what he can do on special teams, he might be getting paid next year. And, you think about what John Brown is making and, what they can do there. I think Kenny Stills, this is kind of an audition. Get him in the room, see what he can do. He's almost a younger version of John Brown in some ways, I believe. So I don't know if the speed necessarily is exactly the same, but I don't see, basically, long story short, from my perspective, and maybe you differ, I don't see a massive role for Kenny Stills in the playoff run. I more think that his role will kind of grow based on the need or, the situation that the Bills find themselves with, potentially with maybe injuries.
No, I do agree with that, but I think you can still put him out there for a handful of snaps next week if you want to and say, listen, you're going long. And if Josh Allen sees you've beaten your guy and it's one-on-one, you might get the ball thrown your way. He's not going to come in with a limited number of practices and know all the ins and outs of this offense. You're not going to want to give him 20, 30 reps on offense when you have John Brown, Stephon Diggs, possibly Cole Beasley, Isaiah McKenzie, who showed he could step up today, Gabriel Davis. But if he can come in, especially with fresh legs, maybe in the second half of that game, when you've had these defensive backs that have been running around all game long and you utilize him as a mismatch of sorts, absolutely. But you're right. Get him in the door, see what he can do. Maybe it's pretty much an audition for him on and off the field at this point for 2021. And with this small sample size, if he can impress the brass on the practice field, in the locker room, and then given some opportunities in these playoff games, then maybe he is an option going forward. And on McKenzie, there's a lot of teams that are going to be looking for a slot receiver that won't be breaking the bank, Obviously he's going to be looking for more than what he made this year in Buffalo, but he's going to be in demand. Like you said, he's shown that he's grown as a player. He's not just a gadget guy anymore, and he can help you on returns as well, as you saw today. So explosive playmaker. There's going to be some teams that want him, and not trying to spoil the party too much here because we want to be in the present talking about the playoffs, but maybe Brian Daboll signs him wherever he lands as a head coach, because I think he will be somewhere as a head coach next year. And why not bring a guy like that along with you that can contribute, that knows your system and your playbook? So definitely you have to be thinking ahead in these situations, and Kenny Stills is the guy that you're thinking ahead with. If
you're an owner, if you're a Jets owner, or the Texans owner, or the Chargers owner, and you're watching these last few Bills games, are you not just sitting there just envisioning the possibilities of what Brian Daboll can do in an offense with Justin Herbert or Deshaun Watson, or even, if the Jets don't go quarterback, if they do decide to stick with Sam Darnold or whatever the case may be? I mean, that's going to be a whole nother interesting offseason AFC East storyline to follow. I mean, if you're the Jets and you want to build around Sam Darnold, what better route to go than to try to convince Brian Daboll to come and do that? And there might be a track there because, Josh Allen and Sam Darnold are so close. I'm sure that, Brian Daboll's familiar with Sam Darnold's situation and what he can do and what he can't do, all those kinds of things. There's so many interesting options for Brian Daboll. And I think that he really has, with the way this season has gone, he's kind of earned almost maybe the pick of what situation he wants to land in.
Yeah, totally agree with that. You look, and the Bills are breaking records every which way this season. Josh Allen, single season passing yards. You saw him pass Jim Kelly for total touchdowns. You saw Stephon Diggs in year one become the NFL's reception and receiving yards leader. And because of their performances, Tyler Bass, as a rookie, the kicker, sets the points record for the Bills with 8 extra points today. It's just all across the board. The Bills are playing at a high level. So like you said, that goes back to Brian Daboll. And he doesn't get full credit for developing Josh Allen, obviously. Allen puts in a lot of work in the offseason with Jordan Palmer. Ken Dorsey deserves some say there. And obviously, Allen himself putting in the work, working on the mechanics and things like that. But you look and you say, okay, he knows how to play to the quarterback's strength. I think even last year, Josh Allen's second year, the stats weren't gaudy, but he went to Allen's strengths, running the ball, what kind of routes he was able to hit the most. He was playing to the strengths of his quarterback. And now you see all these openings up, and he can do wonders for a Deshaun Watson, a guy who on his own has shown he can carry the team. You watch that game today, there wasn't a ton of talent around him. Brandon Cooks is a very good wide receiver still, but it's pretty, bare there, and they're going to be hurting draft-wise, losing that first-round pick as well. But Brian Daboll could do a lot with a guy like that. Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence, the list goes on and on with some of these young quarterbacks. So he can bring that quarterback along, not expecting them to be a top 2, top 3 guy in year one necessarily, whether it's a rookie or someone who has some experience. But as they get more comfortable with one another, have that player play at an MVP type level.
Josh Allen, my takeaway from his press conference today, I talked a little bit about, him already, but there's a real swagger going on with Josh all of a sudden. Like, you could see the way that he's playing the game right now and the weapons that he has around him, that there's this kind of quiet confidence that, no matter what's going on in the game, we can really track it back. We were talking about it in the San Francisco 49ers game where, he came out in that game on Monday Night Football and looked absolutely unfazed about the fact that he was staring across the field at Richard Sherman, one of the best cornerbacks to ever play the game, coming back healthy, a really good defense in San Francisco. Robert Saleh, the defensive coordinator there, that was getting all of this national attention all week, is one of the rising coaches in the league, and he just went out there and he was surgical. And we've seen that continue over the last couple weeks, and I think that to me is is the biggest piece of all of this, is that you have the weapons, you have the play caller, you have the defense, you have all of this, but it does come down to quarterbacks. And he is playing so confidently. Anything that he does, I mean, some of the throws he even made today are throws that you only make when you're feeling yourself in some kind of way.
Yeah, confidence is one hell of a drug. I think that's the saying. And he has every right to be playing at that, the level he is, because he is so confident. We've seen it as the season's gone on, week after week after week, his stat lines, the gaudy 300, 400-yard stat lines, 3 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns. You saw him, and it wasn't a huge run, but he had 2 defenders around him, and he kind of paused for a second and then took off, and he left 2 Dolphins defenders in their tracks early in that game. Right now, for the most part, he can do no wrong. And that's why he's in the MVP conversation. That's why the Bills are 13-3 for the first time in a long time. It's why they're the number 2 seed, and they are a serious Super Bowl contender. And Michael, I see you yelling at us in the comments here, all caps and whatnot, but talking about Brian Daboll and where he could go and talking about all these other scenarios, it's because of how good this current team is. So yes, we are talking a little bit into the future, but we're also talking about how good the Bills are now and what the effects are of that.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about these running backs a little bit, because we mentioned Antonio Williams already on the show, and he did have himself a great game, and he took advantage of the opportunities. He punched it in when he was. He's a physical runner. I love the way that he still moves his feet. When it looks like he's got 1 or 2 guys already wrapped up on him, I don't necessarily think that was going to be enough to bench Devin Singletary or Zach Moss. But I saw a funny meme that I think it was Bruce exclusive, Bruce Nolan, over on our buddy over at Buffalo Rumblings, that tweeted the meme, the guy holding the girl's hand and looking back, and the person was that he was holding the hand, it said Christian Wade, and the person he was looking at was Antonio Williams. I thought that was funny, because there has been a little bit of a push for, like, all right, let's get Antonio Williams into the game, let's get him some carries in the playoffs. And the story of Antonio Williams is phenomenal. I mean, a guy that has just worked his butt off all year long, on and off the practice squad, as the Bills have had to kind of maneuver that. You could tell they liked him all year, to your point, that they kept bringing him back and doing good by him. But I think that there's faith in Devin Singletary and Zach Moss. And I think because of the shift in the identity of the team, they've kind of had a better season than I think anybody really understands. I mean, they're still averaging around 4.5 a carry at the end of the day. And I think it's sometimes difficult when you're not really getting any kind of rhythm-based, sustained activity to produce at the kind of level that Singletary produced at last year. I think that's just kind of the way the offense has matured and evolved.
Yeah, Antonio Williams, like you said, phenomenal story. Former 4-star recruit, started out at Ohio State, didn't get the opportunities that he was envisioning. He goes off to UNC, almost averages 6 yards per carry, but goes undrafted. Long term, and I did like what, like you said, Bruce exclusive there, Bruce Nolan shared with the Christian Wade obsession now going to Antonio Williams. But Williams can play in this league, not just as a running back. He was a special teams MVP for North Carolina last year, so he can contribute in that regard too. So there is a path for him to have a long-term future here. Now, can he unseat a guy like Devin Singletary and Zach Moss? Short-term, absolutely not. But, long-term, stranger things have happened. The Bills, though, when they have had to run the ball these last few weeks, especially during this run, they've done very well. There was the 7-minute drive in prime time where Zach Moss was a bowling ball and he kept moving the chains. And Moss has been really good in that regard, in fact, as of late. Devin Singletary can still make you miss. So the running game, they may not have a Jonathan Taylor in that backfield. They may not have a Derrick Henry type back, but they have guys that can be effective, that can move the chains and can contribute when called upon.
Another cool thing on Antonio Williams, when he was cut initially at the end of training camp and with no preseason, he actually went back to North Carolina for a minute. He was going to be their running backs coach, right?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, a couple weeks later, the opportunity came up and he came back to Buffalo, and he's just been working his butt off all year long. I mean, it's such a tough life as an undrafted guy going through that process, especially when it doesn't work the first time around. And, we've seen some great stories. Like, look at Cam Phillips. Remember him? He was, receiver, the Bills, a couple training camps with the Bills, had a couple really good preseasons, I thought. Just never could stick on. Then he goes and he just absolutely shines in the XFL, has himself, maybe he might be like in the conversation for MVP of that league, goes and lands with the Carolina Panthers, I believe it was, for, training camp. And he's not in the league right now. He didn't make it. So many guys kind of go through, the grind of it, and the stories don't end, well, a lot of the times. And well, I mean, they just don't make it. And so I think first and foremost, Antonio Williams, hats off to him for the way that he's persevered through this. But also there might be a light at the end of the tunnel. And to your point, there might be a real future for him in this league, if not with the Bills, somewhere.
Yeah. Not only did he go into North Carolina running backs coach, he was even looking into a post-playing career in NASCAR at one point, saying, anyone have any connections there? So you're right. There's so many players that probably could play in this league, but they just never get the opportunity. The timing's not right. The opportunity is not right. They bounce around for so long that that opportunity just never comes. And that's the unfortunate part of this game. There's only so many opportunities. There's only so many spots. And when the XFL comes back in a few years, maybe having a league like that can really shine the light on these guys that aren't getting the proper opportunities. But, Williams, to his credit, he stuck around, he hung around, and first rush of his career, 18 yards. Then he scores twice. He rumbles for 20 yards on a reception, has, a statement game in his first opportunity. And Matt, I just got an email. First line of the game has been released. The Bills are a 7-point favorite against the Colts.
Well, there you have it. Breaking news. Ryan Talbot. We got to get something up on the website there on that. So we're gonna have to get going here pretty soon. But we're gonna keep it going because listen, this is a huge day in Bills history. I mean, I think Deion Dawkins said it really well. It was a little bit odd because he said, I got to bring up the exact quote here because I thought it was so interesting. I tweeted it out. I tweeted out a story, and he had Deion Dawkins, I think, in my opinion, is one of the funnest guys to talk to on the team. He was asked about what it means to sweep the AFC East, and he said, and go into the playoffs and win 13 games for the third time in franchise history, which ties a franchise mark. We don't have to get in on anybody's back or anybody's pigtail. I think he might have meant to say like coattails, but whatever. It could be a pigtail. Maybe, you just, grab onto the pigtail and I don't know. It was an awesome quote though. Or receive anybody's blessing. This is all our doing. And it is. This is all they're doing. I mean, Ryan, listen to some of these franchise marks here. Franchise record for points in a season, 501. Franchise record for touchdowns in a season, 60. And they finished the season leading the AFC in scoring, 31.3 points per game. That is up over 10 points, 11.7 points per game up on last year's total. And they have finished the month of December with a plus 79 point differential, which led the entire NFL. So really, I mean, point differential is the name of the game. There's been no better team in the NFL than the Buffalo Bills in December. They're literally going into the playoffs as the league's best team, playing at a level that, even, you think back to the Super Bowl days and it gets foggy and you remember the losses more than anything else. But this is the closest, this is without a shadow of a doubt, the closest thing to that offense that's ever been in Buffalo since.
Yeah. And you look at what Deion Dawkins said today. Sean McDermott has sent this team to the playoffs 3 of his first 4 seasons as head coach, which is quite the accomplishment after such a long playoff drought in Buffalo. But the first year they back in, really probably didn't have business making the playoffs, but the Bengals have that miracle play against the Ravens and the Bills get in. Last year they handled their own business. They clinched a spot on their own on Sunday Night Football, but they still weren't a serious contender. They were a team, a feel-good story, a team maybe that could win a game, maybe 2, but they were never considered a serious Super Bowl contender at that point. This team is a legitimate Super Bowl contender. Now it's up to them to back that up in the playoffs after such a phenomenal run to end the regular season. But you mentioned it. They're scoring points at will over these last final 4 or 5 weeks of the regular season, undefeated since their bye week. beating some really good defenses along the way, mind you, and not just beating them, but just dominating them. 400, 500 yards, 30, 40, 50 points in these games. So offense is clicking. The defense is playing better football. You saw what they did today without two of their starting defensive ends, without their number one cornerback. You get those guys in the mix next weekend. You still incorporate some of these younger guys that you've brought along, and the Bills can really make some noise for the first time in a long time.
Do you have odds on Coach of the Year right now, off the top of your head?
Not in front of me. It was down to Flores and McDermott as the favorites entering this game, though. They were the two favorites, and no offense to Flores, he did a nice job. I don't see how you can, in your right mind, say that he is more deserving than McDermott. You have a team that had a great season, but they're missing the playoffs. They get blown out in a must-win game, essentially. And then you have McDermott, who's led them to a 13-win season. Really could have been a 14-win season if not for a Hail Mary, against the Cardinals. But maybe that game turned everything around for them in terms of putting the pedal to the metal and really blowing some of these teams out. So maybe that was a blessing in disguise. McDermott outcoached Flores today in every phase of the game. Offense, defense, special teams, you name it. How you can go to Flores, I don't know. Flores, he's accelerated that turnaround, that rebuild in Miami, but they also went out and they added a lot of expensive free agents this year. You added a Byron Jones. At the time, he was the highest paid cornerback in the league at the time of that deal. You had Shaq Lawson, $10 million per year. Kyle Van Noy, Landon Roberts. And not all these guys were getting these premier break-the-bank deals, but a lot of them did. And to a lesser extent, Emmanuel Agba. So they went out and they really spent a lot of money in free agency to speed up the process, and it paid off, but it didn't pay off in a playoff appearance. So at the end of the day, Sean McDermott should run away with this award, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was looking for odds on here, and I couldn't find it. I wanted to give maybe the top 3 or 4 candidates, but to me, I think what Sean McDermott has done in a 4-year window with a franchise that was in the state that it was when he arrived, 17-year playoff drought, all that, has been exceptional. And I think that what he's also done this year is, Kansas City has won more games. How many games did Green Bay end up winning? Is it 13?
I think 13 off the top of my head, but I could like 14. I didn't check and see that off the top of my head.
I think just the development of Allen into an MVP candidate, of course, Brian Dable gets probably a bigger chunk of the credit when it comes to that. I mean, he's working with him every day. It's his offense. But I think that the culture that Sean McDermott has implemented here, and also the belief in the quarterback and the way that they went about it, drafting him, I think both of them have readily admitted that they should have put somebody in place to kind of maybe cushion that early part of his career a little bit better. But you let him play, you let him go through his struggles, and you did everything you can as an organization, from Brandon Beane to Sean McDermott, to insulate around him and give him the tools to become the best version of himself. And this is the way they built this team. I mean, I think Brandon Beane is a shoo-in for Executive of the Year. I mean, if he doesn't win it, I think they're doing it wrong, the way that this thing has been built from the ground up, and to have the Bills be a Super Bowl favorite, by a lot of experts. There's just so many things that have gone into the way that this season is played out. And some of the things that players say, I think Stephon Diggs' season is a feather in Sean McDermott's cap, because look at the guy goes out last year. He has a terrific season and is kind of bashed for being this diva, distraction and skipping out in practice. And I think Sean McDermott deserves a bit of the credit for the Stephon Diggs deserves most of the credit, but I think McDermott deserves some of it too, that he's provided an environment for Stephon Diggs to excel in and blossom in. And there's just so many pieces to this that I think scream McDermott.
Yeah, McDermott and Bean, and to a larger extent, Bean staked their jobs on drafting Josh Allen. Josh Allen was considered a high ceiling prospect who was extremely raw. And to take that him when they did, trading up for him twice, mind you, to get to that spot, in NFL, there's not a lot of job security year to year. That pick carried a lot of risk. And now, 3 years later, look at where the Bills are. They are a Super Bowl contender because they built around Josh Allen. They developed Josh Allen. Brandon Beane goes out and he trades for a Stephon Diggs. And a big part of that is probably conversations with Sean McDermott, where McDermott says, we can develop that trust. We can develop that relationship and bring him in here. And we know he's going to be the very best version of himself, something we've heard McDermott say about his players and what they look for in guys. And to Brendan Beane and Sean McDermott's credit, Stephon Diggs ends up leading the league in receptions and receiving yards in his first year in Buffalo. So they're hitting on draft picks. They're hitting on these trades. They're bringing guys along. They're developing a roster with a mix of young and old talent. They have the right mix. We talked about this on a previous show. For every veteran, there's a young guy that's kind of waiting in the wings or that's contributing. There's just such a good mix here across the board in all these positions that is how you bring a team along. You don't go with the crazy, highly paid veterans across the board because then you run out of cap space. You can't just go with all rookies because you need that leadership. This combination of Brendan Beane and Sean McDermott has found that right mix of players, prospects, and vets that has really brought this team along at a significant pace over these last 3 years.
A friend of mine on Facebook shared a South Florida Sun Sentinel story about the game today as a column, a bad Dolphins day, an ugly finish, and now an offseason riddle about Tua's future quarterback. And in the description of the share, it's like, who should be the Dolphins quarterback? Ryan Tannehill. And it's funny how much is he just absolutely, he is a great example, Ryan Tannehill. We got to get going. I don't want to get too much into the weeds here on this, but Ryan Tannehill is a great example of sometimes it's great to have patience and not overreact and maybe find the proper place for the blame when a quarterback or a player is not developing the way that you want them to. Sometimes it's on the coaching staff. And, obviously Adam Gase absolutely screwed all of that up. And, which is not shocking because he's done the same thing in New York, which is on the Jets for hiring him. That's a whole nother conversation altogether. I have a second screen coming, a monitor that I'm very excited for to add to my little new office down here. And tomorrow morning, all that is going to be on it when it gets delivered from Amazon is Indianapolis Colts games. So we can break that down for you this week. We're going to have 2 big podcasts this week. Wednesday, I think, but it might end up being Tuesday and Thursday, depending on when the Bills game is announced. If it's a Saturday game, we might want to give a little leeway. We'll go Tuesday, Thursday for a Saturday game, or Wednesday, Friday for a Sunday game. So stay tuned for that. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, turn on those notifications and of course, smash that like button. I never say it. That's the thing that you're supposed to say on YouTube. Make sure you like our video. It really helps us out as we try to drive awareness to the show. You guys are great on YouTube. So many great comments and interactions. We want to grow it more and make the conversation even bigger. But do that there, and it'll ping you every time we go live on YouTube. You can follow us on Facebook, which is where a lot of folks are watching now, and of course on Twitter. Video is great. We love these live shows, but head over to all the audio platforms, because sometimes we just went 70 minutes here, Ryan. Maybe you came in late and I saw some late questions about who do you think the toughest matchup is on the Colts. Well, if you're subscribed on the audio platforms, Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, any of those, you'll get it right to your phone after the show ends. You can download it and then kind of fast forward through it, listen to it at your discretion. And while you're there, leave us a rating and review. It really helps us out. I'm doing the full sales pitch here right now because, listen, the Shout Football podcast, I saw another comment in here. Big week last week, Ryan. 18 million views, I think, on that Logan Paul clip with Dana White. A lot of eyes on the Shout Football podcast. So we're trying to, generate the interest, obviously, because it's such a fun and unique show that kind of lets us all interact together.
Yeah, I love the interaction part of it. We do read the comments on the side. We can't get to everything. I've seen a few recent comments. When do we know when they will play? Probably around halftime of the Sunday night game. That's generally when they make the announcements. So we'll have something up on the site as soon as we know. You will absolutely know. So kind of stay tuned there. But yeah, we love this environment. So thank you for coming in. Thank you for interacting with us. And like Matt said, if you missed any portion of it, head over to all those podcast platforms, rate, subscribe, and review.
There it is. The Buffalo Bills finished the 2020 season 13-3 for just the third time in franchise history. 56. What was it? 56 to 26. 30-point drubbing of the Dolphins. And for those old school Bills fans, those ones that are a little older, go back to the 90s. Remember when that was the pinnacle rivalry in Bills nation at the time. That's got to feel pretty sweet for those fans that still hold that rivalry to be close to their heart. 6-0 in the division. We'll be back on either Tuesday or Wednesday. Stay tuned on all the channels. We'll announce on our social channels as well. Trying to put together a couple big shows for you guys this week. Enjoy it. You've earned it all these years waiting for a contender, and you got one here. For Ryan Talbot, I'm Matt Parrino. We'll see you real soon. Take care, everyone.
Ready for football? With every game a home game, Tops is ready for you with its TV a Day giveaway. For 6 weeks, every day you shop is a new chance to win a massive 70-inch 4K TV.